Hi, this is F. Paul Driscoll with another episode of Opera News' Sightlines. My guest today is Christina Scheppelmann, who is the General Director of Seattle Opera and has had that position since 2019. Welcome, Christina.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's good to see you.
Thank you for making the time. You must be extremely busy as you're gearing up to start your season next month.
It is busy, yes. We are starting our third week of rehearsals. Today marks the third week, and then next week we're on stage.
So you've got coming up first Elixir of Love and then Tristan and Isolde?
That is correct, yes.
So it's a nice contrast. Can we talk a little bit about how you made the decision for what the repertoire would be this year in Seattle after a little bit of a gap in full seasons? Obviously.
Well, a little bit of a gap. I mean, we had a full season last season, and we managed to get through it without any cancellations, which is basically a miracle. But for this season, I did want to have a proper mix again, so that we offer something to everybody. But especially in the summer, everybody thinks that here the weather's always bad. It's not true. It's really sunny. I wanted for the summer an opera where not everybody dies at the end, and where you can have a little bit of a smile as you walk out into a nice and balmy evening. And so I wanted to do Elixir of Love. The production that was originally done in Santa Fe, it's a Stephen Lawless production that also then went to Philadelphia. I think it's a charming and wonderful production, and I'm very happy to have a really excellent cast. Maestro Bisanti is making his American opera debut with this piece. Salome Giccia, to my surprise, has not been in the US before. She makes a role and her American debut. Salome is a phenomenal singer. I'm glad that she's here. And then, we have Amitai Patti, Andres Costa, Rodin Bogosov, Luca Pisaroni, who makes his debut as Dulcamara, which I find hard to believe that Luca, who's done a lot of these type of lighter roles, especially in Rossini, is singing now Donizetti's Dulcamara for the first time. But I'm really happy with this production. Then Tristan in the fall to contrast, as you said, it is contrast, and that's what I wanted. But I also wanted to have Wagner this season because we still continue with the tradition of Wagner. We're not doing the Ring every other year anymore, but I think Wagner is something that Seattle Opera should continue to present. We did last summer, our first event with audience was an outdoor Walküre here on Seattle Center, on the Seattle Center lawn, and in here behind our building, basically. And that's how we started after the closure. We started with Wagner again, and I wanted this season to be to have a Wagner title. So we do the Tristan, and then we have Samson and Delilah in concert version, and a world premiere, Thousand Splendid Suns, which I believe is very important to continue doing world premieres and new pieces. Otherwise, the art form doesn't have a future if we don't do new pieces. And then we finish with La Traviata, which is, of course, in May also a good box office kind of a box office star, which Traviata is, and I'm very happy with that combination of titles.
The first time I was in Seattle for the opera, I had a very unusual experience. I was in a museum by myself because I was between whatever it was I was supposed to be doing. And two of the guards at the museum were arguing about the show that was on. It was a Ring cycle. And I have never heard opera fans argue that passionately anywhere that I've gone, much less find people who are wearing uniforms and duty shoes in Seattle. What is it about Wagner that strikes such a chord in the Seattle audience?
Well, for many years, Seattle was the house that did the Ring cycle. other than the Met, was the only house in the US that did the ring cycle for a while. Meanwhile, many houses have done it. When Glenn Ross started this company, it was the Met who did the ring cycle, but nobody else. So there is something ingrained in the audience here that makes them feel very special and very passionate about the ring cycle. And I think that's wonderful. It's just right now, I'm not planning on another ring cycle, but we'll see what the future holds. But the passion for Wagner, I think, is definitely still there. And I think it's fantastic when you have in a museum two guards arguing about the production. I think it's fantastic. It's like in some cities in Italy where the cab drivers will argue about the quality of the tenor in the production at their opera house.
So had you spent much time in Seattle before you got this job?
When I lived in San Francisco and I worked at San Francisco Opera, yes, I would come at least once or twice a season to Seattle. I've seen ring cycles twice here. When I came to San Francisco in '94, that same summer, I went for the first time to Santa Fe and to Seattle, and I saw the Lohengrin here in Seattle. I saw also the Tristan and Isolde with Ben Heppner and Jane Eaglin a few years later. No, I've been coming a few times, at least a couple of times a year. And then when I lived in Washington, D.C., I would still come once a year. I always had a very kind and nice contact with Spade Jenkins. And
yes.
So I always came to see what he was doing.
But now that you're working here, is there anything about the city or the audience in the city that surprises you? Is there anything that you're encountered that you hadn't expected?
Surprised not. I mean, it's a city that the Seattle Freeze, there is something to it. I mean, they don't run at you and excited to see you and hug and kiss you. So there is a little bit of a certain austerity, I dare to say, in the personality. But surprising, no. I mean, what did surprise me actually is how beautiful the city is in the summer. I really forgot a bit about it. And it rains a lot, so the city is green, and it's just gorgeous in the summer. And the audience is also very kind and very enthusiastic. The city has grown a lot. Downtown is certainly different than it was in '94.
Sure.
But big surprises, no. I just find it a very beautiful and enjoyable city, actually. And I like cities with water, and there's plenty of that here.
Exactly. So your career has been an unusual one in that you started as a banker. I don't know anyone else who has your kind of responsibility in opera that had.
Well, I have colleagues who were lawyers once upon a time, so there's a bit of everything. And I think being a banker is useful. I mean, you do have an overall responsibility, also the financial responsibility. So I think nothing is wasted in life, and I feel that background has been very useful. I then worked in an artist management and then started working in theaters. It's all been helpful and useful.
How did you make the transition to working in theaters?
I've been in theater before. I was in the children's chorus in the Hamburg State Opera. I did internships there. I've been a super there. I knew a lot of people around the opera in Hamburg. And also because I grew up with Spanish and being around the opera, speaking Spanish, I could speak to the Spanish singers and the Italian singers. Nobody else around Hamburg really could have much conversation at that time. Spanish and Italian were not exactly the most spoken languages. And so I made a lot of connections with singers. And I knew I wanted to work in a theater. And through a singer, I made connection with her agent, and then her agent offered me a job. And so I finished my banking career, which was very short-lived, and then went to Milan and worked in an artist management in Milan for 4 years. Went to Venice, went to Barcelona, went to San Francisco, DC, Middle East, Barcelona again, and Seattle.
So when you're planning for someplace like Seattle, or any company, but Seattle in this specific instance, how far ahead do you allow yourself to plan?
Right now, not at all, because the period after COVID is very complicated. Under normal circumstances, I would plan anywhere between 2, 3, and 4 years in advance. Right now, the planning time is shorter. It's a couple of years because we're so much in doubt, all of us, as to what happens to the audience.
Sure.
And if the audience doesn't come back, we have a problem, not only financially, but if you don't have an audience, how many performances do you do? Where are we going really in this business and in this world, in the performing arts? Because we all face similar problems. It's in Europe very similar. And you have to take this into consideration. I cannot just merrily plan ahead as if nothing had happened. So I rather go slowly. And I do still think that the quality can be maintained because we have a lot of really wonderful singers and great. There's a quantity-wise, I think there are more great singers and really excellent singers today or in the last 5-10 years than there were 30-40 years ago. There's a greater quantity of excellent singers.
And why is that, do you think? Because of training anywhere in the United States or Europe?
Well, if you really look around and if you compare numbers also, we have today many more opera companies and festivals than 40 years ago.
Yeah.
So you need more singers. So the opera studios have also produced more singers and good singers. The American Opera Young Artist Program, in my opinion, is still the best in the world. As much as the Europeans have modeled them after the American programs, but I still think that the American young artist programs are really, really excellent and have really created wonderful artists and singers. And then you had Europe that built a lot of young artist programs in their opera houses. So that also then produced, I hate to call it that way, but for lack of better words, but produced excellent singers that came onto the market and into the industry. The way they get prepared today really gives us as opera companies a lot of choices of very good artists.
And in my opinion, the training seems to encompass not just older works or standard repertory works, but the younger singers seem to be more eager to look at new work.
Absolutely. But you also, I think, especially in the US, you have a lot of composers who know how to write for the voice. I mean, when you write so that it's singable and that you can work with the singers in order to create a piece that is vocally attractive, then you will have singers that are interested in singing it. And sometimes singers also that are in career are interested in singing something new. When they've sung their roles many times, some really want to have something new written, maybe written for them specifically, for their voice. And young singers realize that in this country, there's a lot of new music, new pieces, and young composers that do write interesting music. So I think that collaboration is important. I actually just wish that the conservatories would have more collaboration at that level already between the vocal faculty and the composers. That's something that is missing, and that's why I started in Washington the American Opera Project, that really came out of the thought, why aren't there more composers that are trained and learning with singers already at conservatory level? And that was trying to fill the gap, and I'm very happy that this program still continues and exists because it's for young composers and librettists to work with young singers and develop the skill and the knowledge about the voice, the skill to write for the voice and the knowledge about the voice. It's the most complex instrument of all.
So when I don't know where you came in terms of the commissioning process for 1,000 Splendid Suns. Was it your commission or was that something you...
No, that was Aiden. That was my predecessor, but it had been postponed a couple of times and I was determined to finally put it on. So I inherited the commission, but it is a wonderful piece. It's an excellent libretto based on the book. It's dramatic and interesting music. Sheila Silva spent quite a lot of time in India also studying the Hindustani music and its principles and its traditions, and it is incorporated in the piece. And then I very much wanted to have a woman stage director. And I managed to find somebody who I have immense respect and admiration for. Roya Sadat is an incredible personality. She's an Afghan woman that, with her husband, created in Kabul Roya Film, which produced TV for TV and produced movies. She has received awards. She's a recognized force in a specific movie business. Her latest movie, Letters to the President, is really impressive and difficult to watch, because it really shows a reality that is very violent also, and psychologically also very, very hard. But she is an incredible woman with great sensitivity, with great intelligence, and I'm very happy that she decided to be part of this project, because she's never done opera before. She has used music in her films and in TV, of course, but opera was new to her. And she traveled several times to meet with Sheila Silver, and she came here to see the opera house and to meet with all of us. And I'm very impressed by her. She's a striking woman, a striking personality with great intelligence to really feel her way into the opera and understand what's different between theater and movie and opera.
Did you have a chance to workshop it at all in Seattle?
No, it was workshopped 3.5 years ago, I think, in New York, and not since. But we have a good rehearsal period with enough time for that, and I have confidence that they'll work well based on the workshop at the time and what Sheila has learned from that, and then also what Roya and Sheila are working on in order to put it ultimately on stage. I think we're on a really good track.
It's a very exciting project because of the story that it's putting on stage, which is outside the normal new work model, say, where there's a classic novel that ends up on stage or something that was already.
It's a story that Roya has lived, basically. I mean, not directly this story, but she was born, she grew up under the Taliban. She was taught privately in an aunt's house because she couldn't go to school at the time. And then things slowly changed in Afghanistan and she could do her work. But even that work would always faced challenges. It wasn't easy sailing and just go out in Afghanistan and let's film outside, let's film a movie. She was constantly faced with obstacles, and it takes strength and determination, and she sure has that. She also created a film festival in Herat, which of course now doesn't happen anymore, and she also is based in the US now. She's been in the US for a year because pretty much any artist is on a blacklist of the Taliban, and so is she. She's a known entity as one of the few female movie directors and TV directors and producers in Afghanistan. She cannot go back right now, so she's here. And the story for her is meaningful because it's a real story. It's fictional, but it is based on life under the Taliban. Mm-hmm. She also, though, wants to tell about the beauty of Afghanistan. She says Afghanistan is a beautiful and wonderful country with wonderful people. That some people create that government doesn't mean that the whole country is so dark and violent. And she said the book is called Thousand Splendid Suns, mm-hmm. for good reasons, because Afghanistan has wonderful nature, thousands of years of history, and not just the recent history that we have heard about. There's more to Afghanistan than that, and that's what she wants to tell. She wants to tell about her country, but she also wants to tell about the amazing friendship between two women that leads one to sacrifice herself for another. Mm-hmm. And that is a human story and a human bond that is, I think, hard to comprehend. I think if you really think about it, who of us would sacrifice ourselves for somebody else. It is truly an amazing story, and a story that is based on something in reality in that country.
Well, I think that this is all we have time for, but you are brilliant, and I must say this. I can't remember the first time I met you. I think it was either in Washington or Santa Fe, but you always have such a clear and cheerful outlook. I would love to know what your secret is, especially now.
Hopeless optimism, and I love what I do, and frankly, I love life and I love people. There are a lot of wonderful people that make life worthwhile. I love music. I look forward to the next day every day to see what will it be.
Well, I look forward to whatever happens next in Seattle. But thank you so much for joining us, Christina Scheppelmann, General Director of Seattle Opera. This is F. Paul Driscoll for Opera News' Sightlines. Thank you very much for joining us.